What's up, everyone? We're back with the final episode of TWIF This Week in Fantasy, my little NFL preview type thing that I like to do. Now, usually it's very focused on my fantasy football league and me predicting the matchups, and thereby predicting the matchups of most of the used players in the league. But this week, I'm going to be going over how the season ended because obviously fantasy football's over, and then I'm going to be predicting the playoffs. And with me is the guy who had the best record in the division or in the regular season, Ben King of Funny Rogers. So, what's up, Ben?
Didn't matter in the end, but thanks for having me.
Yep, semifinals, right?
Semifinals.
Lost in the first round.
And I lost in the semifinals, but we'll get to that. We'll get to everything.
All right, so here's what happened in the Super Bowl. Tyler Eifert and Lamar Miller both went down with injuries, and both of those players were pretty much who I was relying on. I also started two Dolphins because they were playing the bad Buffalo defense. I figured after Landry had 2 straight weeks with over 100 yards, the chance of him getting over 80 yards or him or this tight end catching a touchdown against a bad defense and them getting between them 10 points was pretty good, but I was wrong.
Yeah, that's where it got you. Was just those two players right there with Javaris Landry and Gabriel. Landry's. Can you click on Landry's thing? Has he been pretty inconsistent?
Landry was terrible this year, but right near the end of the year with the new quarterback,
with Matt Moore,
he got over 100 yards 2 weeks in a row.
Okay, so he really did. So.
And when I got hurt, I needed a tight end.
Yeah, and I can't blame you for making that choice, like you said, against a really bad Buffalo defense. That had just fired Rex Ryan, the week before. So they were basically just out there, and they still had a terrible game. So.
And Lamar Miller basically gets a dozen every week, and him being out, of course, I dropped him because it was the last week, but
yeah,
had to plug in Powell, and then there's kind of this weird flex gap that opens after the Miller injury. As far as disco, Brady did well, Zeke did well. It's what you would expect with his lineup. And he wins the Super Bowl. Very close.
Yeah. To be honest, you called it, I would say maybe 2/3 away, or just when No Fried's season was starting to pick up. You called it saying that he looked like a playoff contender. And you were calling it right from the beginning when that happened, because he made some moves like the Tom Brady draft pick that really helped out later down the road. Devontae Freeman turned out to be, just amazing. Or Devote, or whatever I don't know pronounce it. And then Zeke, of course. Kind of the same way I felt when I drafted Adrian Peterson his rookie year. It's one of the best years in rookie history, if not the best. And then Brandon Cooks is interesting because Cooks
top 10.
Yeah, that's the one that really did it for him, because he doesn't have a great wide receiver core. He just needed something to solidify a couple points every week. But Brandon Cooks really did it.
Yeah, he had Fitz too, for what that's worth.
Graham's good too.
Fitz was 17. That's not terrible.
Yeah, Fitz is still a good slot receiver now.
So here, I'm not really so concerned about the results of these irrelevant games, but let's just talk about how each person did for the year.
A little recap.
So Seagouch, I'd say he's middle of the pack, decent. He had a typical Seagouch team with a lot of risk. He had Bell, who, of course, a lot of people predicted to get hurt and was gone for the first 4 weeks. But at the same time, he had Roethlisberger, who did well too. And he had this explosive element on his team where he was relying on Gronkowski, but it didn't pan out.
Yes.
And that really hamstrung him because he wasted a high pick on Gronk. Overall, I'd say it's an average year for Seagouch.
Yeah, Seagouch does some really unethical, or not traditional things when it comes to running his roster. And as we've seen in the past, it works a lot of the time, and a lot of the time it doesn't. And it's not like he had a terrible season. Like you said, middle of the pack, 8-6. Was it 5th best record? Definitely not a terrible season by any standard, but like you said, that was it the Gronk pick?
Gronk, yeah.
That's what probably killed his season. And if you think about it, if Gronk has a good season this year, look who his tight end was at the end of the season. Henry. And who had a decent year at first, but
this is one of the guys who I was almost considering picking up instead of the Dolphins
And it's
guy.
not a bad tight end by any means, but I mean, if you have Gronk there, Gronk is the only one of the only tight ends who can be a game changer. I mean, 20 points, I mean, 2 touchdowns, at least 100 yards a game with Brady. That's a good solid game every week. I mean, but this year with injuries, inconsistency, the quarterback thing, I mean, it's just been a lot of bad, like, just bad luck for Gronk. Plus the Madden cover, he was Madden cursed. So I really do feel bad for Seagouch because I feel like if he would have had Gronk there to solidify that tight end spot, he would have maybe have a chance to go 9-6 or have a 10-win season. So
I think with Gronk and Eidfert both having such bad years, this meta and trend we see developing of people favoring this early tight end pick strategy, even as far as first round, picking Gronk some people, I think that's going to fade away. We're going to see less of that.
And we probably will, but with Seagouch, I'm not sure if that's the case because, I mean, Seagouch, that's how he won his Super Bowl basically is like with picks like Gronk because they have outstanding seasons like they do. Gronk had a down season. I mean, he might have a great season next year, and Christian might pick him third or fourth round again, and it might pan out for him. But you're right. I do think the fad of drafting tight ends early on is hopefully dying away because it's so consistent. You drafted Eifert. Terrible season.
Yeah.
Like, I had him last year. Great season. I loved him. I would have drafted him if I was at the draft. Kappa. But yeah, I mean I hope that trend dies because if you don't pick wide receivers and running backs in your third and fourth rounds, I mean what are you doing?
I think Seagouch will continue to be unorthodox, but I'm interested to see how Seagouch's drafts next year because
maybe he'll learn, maybe he'll be the same, maybe he'll tweak it.
Gronk is kind of like the holy grail of these gimmick players, these really aggressive feaster people who like to play these feast or famine crazy styles where they draft Gronk and they like people like Hopkins or maybe Amari Cooper, Julio Jones, like a lot of these players who
I literally had two of those players.
They're good and explosive, but Christian's always gravitating towards these players. I don't expect to see that change.
That's very true.
As far as Clap for Bacon goes, of course, C.J. Anderson went down in the middle of the year, and he had that week where he played me and really had crappy running backs because the trade hadn't gone through. But we saw kind of where Clap for really, I think, his season turned was that trade with Aaron where he really fleeced Aaron out of a lot of talent.
He really did. I mean, I thought Aaron at the beginning of the season had a really strong team, and then that trade really did it left him depleted in a lot of areas. And as a fantasy owner, that's one of the main things that I'm concerned about and always try to bolster is my depth because I feel like you have to have pretty good depth to make it to the playoffs and win the Super Bowl. Which, as we see with No Fried, he had amazing depth. I mean, he had depth all the way throughout his lineup, or throughout his roster. So I agree that trade really was. I feel like I just didn't like it. I mean, for multiple reasons.
Yeah, the fact that Aaron had all the bargaining power, where Clapfor was in desperate need of running backs to the extent where he was going to be losing almost every single week until he shored up that position.
Yeah.
And Rampy essentially gave him the choicest picks, I feel, when he could have given him the garbage.
Yes.
He could have given him to sip on like old red whiskey, but instead he gave him the Makers. He gave him the Crown Royal really for no reason.
Really true. I mean, sometimes when you offer too much, you're hurting yourself.
Yeah, I think Aaron really wanted to dump Murray of the Raiders, and I think that was kind of foolhardy because I think Aaron thought Murray was worse than he was, and that bit him in the ass.
True.
Overall, I would say Clapford did a good job managing, and that trade specifically is something we can point to and say, this is a big blockbuster trade that addressed a need, and it shows that people are in fact active and you can make ground-breaking trades in the league. So I think Clapford did well this year.
7-7, he did his best with what he had. He's a great manager, like we know. So hats off to the commissioner for another good season.
Here we have you versus Spencer, two very good teams. Now, these were the two teams that lost in the semifinals. Of course, Spencer lost to me in the playoff edition of the Cousin Bowl in a very close game.
Also, that was a great game. That playoff or semifinals.
Yeah, and you put up, I think it was like 98. It was it was near triple digits, a solid performance, but you lost. To No Fried.
And No Fried put up some ungodly numbers. Like I think it was like 138. I mean, it was close to 150. I mean, his roster, the way that it worked. I mean, wow. Oof.
Yeah, No Fried was scary. And as far as you versus Spencer goes, it was kind of what you expect to see from Spencer, where McCoy and Duke Johnson combined for a lot of points. And then, even though his flex didn't do anything, Jordan Reed no-showed again, and Golden Tate's really not that good. Sammy Watkins had like the one good game he always has a year that makes people draft him in the third and fourth round every year for no reason. So Spencer was somewhat of a good pick to kind of say, okay, Sammy Watkins has been shitty all year. This is the week when he's going to get this is, the Sammy Watkins week.
Yeah.
So Spencer, this very well could have been terrible. It was good on him to hit the high note, hit it perfectly. And that is really the difference maker in this game, because you put up a very good 109, and he put up 120. So, I mean, getting 21 out of Sammy Watkins, let's look at Sammy Watkins. Oh. Yeah.
I mean,
he was hurt he gets hurt.
And he had that one big game, and you're exactly right to point that out, because, I mean, if it wasn't for that, if he had a 0 or a 1 or 2 or 3, I could have, I probably would have won if he would have had a goose egg.
Yeah.
But
to me, it's every year that Sammy Watkins gets hurt or underperforms, because it's not that Sammy Watkins is terrible talent-wise, it's that every year he's touted as a fantasy player who's supposed to be taken in like the third or fourth round.
Because he's a number one. He's a number one on a
number
football team.
One, but it's on the Bills
with Tyrod Taylor / EJ Manuel.
And he's injury prone.
Yes.
So he gets all this dick riding, and then it's like, well, Sammy Watkins was Sammy Watkins again. He's really putting up like Kenny Britt numbers.
Yeah.
He's having one good game all year.
And it's the case with a lot of players. Just because, like you said, it has nothing to do with talent-wise. He's, I think, a great player. It's just the fact that, the offense that he's in. He's not a really good fantasy player.
Right.
He's a good talent player for the Bills, but fantasy-wise, he's a hit or miss. He's a 0 one day, and then he's in the semifinal game or the third place game, 21 points. So he's one of those frustrating players.
Also, I think it's interesting, Matt Bryant got 19 for Spencer.
And, I was proud with Justin Tucker getting 13, and then Bryant, at the very end, I think that was a Monday night game, that Bryant-Carolina game. It was like, he was just,
yeah.
I think, at that point, I think he was just like adding insult to injury with that too. And to have Matt Bryant, who plays for my quarterback, like all those drives that are getting him into range and failing, literally is my quarterback's fault. So that kind of stung as well. And
another thing we have to point out is, as much as the Kevin the Commish trade got attention, the trade you did with Spencer involving Spencer sending you DeMarco Murray, that of course I've talked about a lot in these TWIF videos. But DeMarco Murray, interestingly here, really underperformed.
Against Jacksonville, in a division game.
He was ranked 5th, and in a game when he really needed to perform and it mattered, he kind of ate shit for money.
Yeah, and, let's see. He's had
only one game below double digits.
Yeah, all season before that, and then that was his second one. And it really did come at an uncommon time, because my star running back, DeMarco Murray, didn't show up. And both David Johnson and McCoy both showed up for Christian. In spectacular fashion. Shady McCoy has been really consistent as a fantasy player in Buffalo. Even though they haven't been successful as a team, he's a really good player. Look at those numbers at the end of the season.
He stayed healthy, actually.
Yeah, exactly, which is something that he failed to do in Philadelphia.
Do you think that he shakes his title as being injury prone now officially?
I think so. I think at least you have to give him the benefit of the doubt. I mean, it's been 2 seasons of healthy football where he's played pretty much the entire season. He might have 1 or 2 games missed, but for him, that's good. I mean, instead of having a hamstring injury.
What do you think of this Pharaoh guy? Spencer was convinced he was going to do absurd damage, and he really performed poorly.
I've never even heard of this. I mean, not even to be rude, but it's like
I think this is one of these like.
Is he like a backup running back for like the Chargers or something?
Well, the Chargers had that guy Melvin Gordon forever, and then he got hurt near the
Yeah.
end of the year. And
I forgot he got hurt. That's right.
Yeah, this was supposed to be like the second coming, but the Chargers were never good. Phillip Rivers turns the ball over.
Oh, so this was the next man up.
So yeah, this is supposed to be the guy who gets all the carries.
Spencer's smart enough to know that never hardly ever works. I mean, like you have Adrian Peterson going down. People are like, oh yeah, Ostiata is gonna go be so good for the Vikings. He has all season to be the running back. He gets like 4 points a game. I mean, the Lions, like Theo Riddick goes down, and like, oh yeah. Well, actually, Zach Zinner did good at the end of the season, but
against the Cowboys,
for half the season, it was like Dwayne Washington. Like, I mean, he's gonna be the next guy. Like, and people pick him up in hopes that these second string, running backs that become first string overnight are gonna become great fantasy players, and that's not always the case.
And it's interesting that
with a Jai maybe, but
Spencer, who had so much running back depth all year, that's all we heard about is running back depth. He's starting Pharaoh, who's doing really poorly. At the same time, he's also struggling to start receivers. Now, in this game, of course, Watkins went off and did really well.
But and the funny thing is, I had Golden Tate for most of the season and didn't really do much. But
overall, I think Spencer managed pretty well, but he went so running back heavy. Where his theory of he always preaches his theory of how easy it is to fill out a roster with waiver wire receivers and how you can just kind of play the hot hand off the waiver wire. We saw this season there wasn't as much depth at receiver, and Spencer
not much at all.
Spencer had trouble just filling 2 decent warm bodies at receiver for some weeks.
I mean, this season's been kind of weird in that regard because in a lot of NFL seasons, most teams have a number 1 guy that kind of attracts most of the fantasy points and targets and yards and end zone touches. And we haven't really seen that this year. It's been kind of spread out amongst a couple of guys, or now there's multiple dynamic wide receivers on the team, so it kind of gets divided up. So it's been a really weird wide receiver wise, like you said, because you can't really just rely on the waiver wire like you used to be able to. Like I remember one season Christian dropped Wes Welker.
Yeah, I remember that.
And I picked him up, and
Sure.
Yeah, maybe back in times like that in this league you could do stuff like that, but not now where we actually have, we're older and mature, owners of this league. So but it has been really weird in that sense that it's been not a one wide receiver, tandem or a system really in fantasy right now.
Overall, good year for Spencer. He lost to me, which is like probably one of the last people he wanted to lose to, because one of the best rivalries in the league.
That is embarrassing. Not embarrassing, but it is your little title to own, because that's why we love this league. You got the Cousin Bowl. You got
rivalries,
and you got father-son rivalry. The rivalries in this league are great, and definitely Spencer had a great season. He's always been a good owner, but like you said, those wide receivers at the end kind of cost him.
I'll be interested to see how he drafts next year. If he reaches for maybe he'll take Jordy Nelson in the 3rd or something.
It'll be. It's interesting. We'll see if he will change his strategy after coming this close and this far, only to be kind of let down by his wide receivers. So, yeah, I can see him doing that.
Overall, I think you had a good solid year, but even in the playoffs, you put up 98 and 109 and lost both games. Sometimes you just get kind of unlucky.
And I realized I feel like at the end of the season, I kind of got complacent with my roster, in the fact that I just had a lot of. Oh,
she's fine.
Sorry, Liz. But I had a lot of players that were kind of started off hot and then they kind of fell off at the end.
Rhaegar.
Yeah, but I had a lot of players that were just kind of tailing out at the end.
No, it's okay. As soon as you put her on the ground, Rhaegar jumped on. All right, so Rampy and Weston. Weston just smoked Rampy.
Yeah.
And knowing Weston, I bet he's thinking like, man, I would have won the Super Bowl, even though he didn't even make the playoffs.
Oh, I know, and he was so close.
He was so
that,
close.
That ending was a great three-way, race for that division.
Cousins heated up at the end of the year, and that was good for Weston. He was consistent. And this is so interesting to me. Weston, contrary to Spencer, loves receiver styles. So Spencer likes running back styles. Weston likes receiver styles. Weston actually got the rank 1 and 2 guy this year. 1 and 2.
In wide receiver.
And wide receiver, and he didn't make the playoffs.
And that's crazy.
It's just unbelievable that if you go into the season and you want to play that style of receiver focused and you actually roster 1 and 2 and you still can't even make the playoffs.
It's hard. I mean, that's tough for Weston because to do that strategy and pick that high and pick 1 and 2 and guess right basically on both of them, that's impressive. I mean, that's really good drafting right there. But the fact that the rest of those positions let him down so much that he couldn't make up for those other picks. I mean, his running backs were terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, Mark Ingram.
Ingram has 3 games a year where he gets a bunch of touchdowns.
And then the others is like 50 yards.
Yeah.
Like whenever you face Mark Ingram as an opponent, like you're like, oh, he's probably gonna score 4 or 5. And you can lock that in.
Yeah.
Like he won't give you a dud, but he'll give you like 4 or 5 points. Like
Ingram's kind of like Kenny Britt. Like he'll eat shit for week after week after week.
And then Britt will get like a 3 touchdown game. Like, out of
3.
nowhere. Like,
and then everyone starts him, and then he's garbage for weeks.
That always happens. People always overreact. That people have like a 27-point game, and like they're on the bench. They're like, oh, I should have started. I'll start him next week. They get like 2 points. Yeah.
And then the next week.
Yeah, and like they just because of one game, they get this like extreme like, oh, it happened once, it could happen again. Like, no, it's not gonna happen again. Like it's Kenny Britt.
Yeah, I think Kelly had to share too many carries. He had Thompson to deal with.
Yeah, and they pass the ball way too much.
Yeah, that was kind of an aired out offense.
It's the most. I think it's a 70-30 they said on ESPN or garbage ESPN, but I think it was like a 70-30. Like that's ridiculous for NFL. Usually it's like 50-50 or at least more run than pass. So.
Yeah. Overall, Weston had a solid year. He got kind of a bad beat at the end of the year, but he did have it. If all he had to do was win his last game in the division was his, so he controlled his fate.
And and that's probably what's heartbreaking for him in that sense because he had a good team. He had a chance to lock it up, and I mean, look at this. His team scored 134.
Yeah.
That's more than anyone scored in and that's most that anyone scored this week. Even though it wasn't in the actual playoffs, it was in the consolation round. If you would have made the playoffs, that's either 3rd place or 1st place, depending on what happened in the semifinal game. So that's what's tough is he had a potential to be up there, in those top 3, but bad luck. Some bad luck went his way.
I think it's interesting if you compare Weston and Spencer, the 2 Aggies. Weston has this style where he's all about the receivers and the explosive guys. Spencer likes the consistent backs.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just the opposite ends of the Aggie spectrum. And if we look at how their seasons went, although they're both good active owners, and talent-wise, Spencer had David Johnson and McCoy, like top 3 guys. Weston had Evans and Antonio, 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Both of them failed to make the Super Bowl. And that's just really interesting.
And that's why my strategy. I've never won the league, so my strategy obviously doesn't work. But I've always tried to have it balanced out. I always wanted to have a good, ratio of running back, wide receiver. I like to balance that out, and that way I'm not so short-ended in one section and have depth over than star players. But there's different strategies. And some work, some don't. A lot of it's luck, a lot of it's not. So.
Weston was definitely in the top 6, or like probably top 4 or top 5.
I would say it was number 5.
Yeah.
Honestly, at the end of the season, the way his team is or is right now, I would definitely say number 5. I can't. I want to say 4, but just because he didn't make the playoffs, I can't. I just can't put it up there.
Here's the thing. His team and Spencer's team are both scary. And as far as how scary they are, it's very similar. But I think when you look at stylistically the way Spencer's team functions, his scariness is far more consistent. Like Weston's team could pop you for 150.
Yes.
Like Spencer's team is almost as dangerous, but it's almost like the floor, like Spencer's team is almost going to start at like 90.
Exactly.
It's
Like
just,
the ceiling that or not the ceiling, the floor that you're right, like you said, like just from the bottom up. I mean, he's going to start off with at least 90. I mean, 80, 90 every time. I mean, and that's hard to beat. I mean, because even if your team does good, I mean, there's nothing more frustrating than scoring 120 and then having your opponent score 121. I mean, and Spencer's that kind of player where he'll just outscore you every time. I mean, with huge numbers. I mean, because did he have the most points in the league at the end of the season? Overall wise.
all right, so we're about to wrap it up, so let's take a final look here. And who did have the most points? It was Spencer.
Yeah, it was.
So Spencer had the most points. Who had the fewest? It was old Disco. He's gone.
He's gone, yeah.
A dead man walking.
Just like Schiller, he's out.
It's pretty disappointing that someone who won the Super Bowl
Last year
couldn't be bothered to show up and set his roster. And I know he had health problems at one point, but it's something that persisted throughout the year and superseded any sort of health problem.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand health problems for a period of time, but I mean, it's just literally all you have to do is get on a computer or your phone, just click it. I mean, it's not that hard. I mean, it's sad. I mean, he won. I mean, he's been great for years. I mean, he's been respected. I mean, and now, I mean, he's probably gonna be out of it. So.
I have a really cool Asian friend that goes to UT that I play fantasy sports with. I think it might be him that gets plugged in.
Well, hey, that's great.
He's really consistent and knowledgeable, but
active player, then that's all. I mean, that's all I can ask for.
I'm gonna name a team, and you just give me your brief end of season thoughts on them.
Okay.
So, like, what do you think about Rampy's team at the end of the year? He's 6-8. What do you think?
I feel like he got dealt a lot of bad luck. As you can see, he literally had a plus average when it came for points against, points for and points against. I mean, by 5. But still, I mean, that proves that most of his games were close. And he lost a lot of the insight. I mean, if you go to his division games, I mean, most of those games are losses, or the ones that he loses in the division are very close. I mean, like kind of like heartbreaking. I mean, very bad luck for Rampy. That trade, once again, just kind of killed his season at the end as well. A lot of his players that were starting off that did so well didn't do so well. So a tough season for Rampy, but I think he drafted pretty decently. Like, I can't say anything super bad about his draft, but I just think,
really.
I thought it was a good draft, honestly. I mean, I thought based off what we knew of players at the time that it was a good.
Do you remember he went kicker and defense 6th and 7th round?
Well, I was meaning his. I guess I forgot about that.
He had Todd Gurley.
Wow.
He had Todd Gurley first overall too.
And I liked that pick. And like at the time, I would have liked that pick because
a lot of people defend that pick. I was never a fan of Gurley though.
And neither was I. But at the time, the Rams' first season in LA, there was a bunch of hype around the team. You know, they're setting Case Keenum starting, so they're going to run the ball more. And I thought that was a good pick. And I mean, I can't defend the 6th and 7th pick. I mean, don't get me wrong, like that's atrocious. Like, Rampy's stupid for that. But like for his like wide receiver running back combo, I mean, I thought most of his picks at the time sounded smart.
A few years ago, Rampy picked David Akers in like the 7th to spite me, and like it's weird because
he's always trolled in drafts.
The way that Aaron drafts, it's almost like the first 6 picks. He like gets a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and a tight end, and then he's like, okay, instead of like doing what everyone else does and getting more running backs and receivers, he's like, it's time to fill out the roster. And he's like, I need a defense and a kicker now.
I'm gonna dick around and draft Aaron Hernandez in the 7th round.
Well, and it's like
when he's suspended for murder, like
it's like it's the 9th round and Aaron has like one of everything. And he's like, okay, good, now I can draft my back.
Yeah, that is what he does, and it's very strange.
You have to. If you look at how like someone like Spencer, it's like running back. Yeah. Or like Weston, like receiver, tight end, or Seagouch, tight end, receiver. It's interesting to see stylistically the different ways that people draft.
I mean, and it's weird that he does it like that because I would never like the way my mind works. I would never like draft that way, and there's nothing wrong with it. I guess it's just kind of strange to draft a defense in the 7th round when defenses are known for being inconsistent.
Hey Riley, can you shut the doors, please? How do you think that if you look at Cameron's team, he got lucky and got Melvin Gordon and still managed to and he got Dak and he had Drew Brees. Didn't trade either of them, managed to finish 6-8. What are your thoughts on Cameron?
Cameron, I was really impressed with Cameron's team for a while. I mean, I'm still proud as Cameron as an owner. He was active. He made some good moves. I thought his draft was pretty good. I mean, over the years of watching Cameron play, even though he had a 6-8 season, I still think Cameron was, a pretty good owner. And I stand with Rampy. I think he was dealt, some crappy luck. I mean, but for the most part. Other than being a Cowboy homer, I see a lot of progression with Cameron. I mean, as an owner.
I hope next year Cameron can take the steps of using features like this feature right here under the My Team tab, the trading block.
Yeah.
Where if you do want to make a trade, make it known, use the trading block feature. It lets you post which players are available for trade and whatnot and what you need.
Exactly.
Alright, so that's the video. I'm the runner-up. You had the best
Congratulations.
record. Thank you. Congrats to No Fraud, really.
Yeah, really. What a team. What a team. I mean, and it always seems like that happens sometimes when the wild card team comes in at the very end because they got it rolling those last 3-4 weeks of the season. And then, No Fried's case, 6, 7, 8 weeks of the season. So, great season for him. He'll be returning next year as the returning champ. So, it'll be interesting to see some new faces, I guess, or a new face or two, and we'll see who. I don't know. We'll see who wins next year. But we got a while for that.
Yep. Like, comment, sub.